You want to talk, Kate?
Yeah. So even though many students dread writing the main essay, it is very important. It really is, as we write, it's a marketing piece and also known as a showcase piece. So it's a way to, number one, stand out from other applicants. Can somebody else let those students in? I just didn't. Okay, great. It's one way to make yourself stand out from other applicants. So, and show how unique you are and what you have to offer the school. It's another way to communicate who you are beyond the numbers, which is your GPA and your test scores, and your class rigor. It's an opportunity to show how you'll contribute to your community. It's an opportunity to demonstrate how you can think critically. And it's also an opportunity, as Jenny shared, to share your own unique story using your own voice. So it's yet another layer of information to provide to the school to make you stand out.
So the admissions essay is a really weird piece to write. It's unlike anything that high school kids have ever written before. It's 650 words, which is actually pretty short. And it's a piece that admissions counselors at colleges are going to read in definitely 60 seconds or less. So whatever message you share about yourself, it has to be able to be digested and understood literally in under a minute. But at the same time, it has to be deeply personal, highly complex, and very analytical. So those things don't really go together. Short and soundbite doesn't really go with super personal, deep, and complex. Which is why it's such an awkward piece. In addition, most kids have never written an essay about themselves. You're taking that 5-paragraph essay form and you're applying it to something, that you really feel passionately about in your heart. And again, very, very awkward.
The basic recipe to a main essay is, this is who I was, okay? An experience I had was, how I changed or grew was, and what I have to contribute as a result. So all of your essays are going to be sharing a piece with you, a piece of you that is kind of growth oriented. You're going to show how you developed over time and how you can pass on those skills, talents, and values to others, essentially, what you have to bring to the school.
And the experience that you choose to write about can be something that happened in a, course of 5 minutes. It can be something that happened in a second. It can be something that happened gradually over 5 or even 10 years. So for everybody, that's different. Now, the Common Application has 7 prompts. These, we've kind of boiled them down to little bullet points for you. Just take a minute and read these over. These are the basic themes of the prompts. You can write about a background or talent, a time you faced a challenge, question to belief, something that has been done for you, an experience where you where you had a realization and growth, something that captivates you, sometime when you made a contribution. You can also write about topic of your choice, which is our favorite. You write about anything that you want.
But needless to say, the Common Application prompts are easily found. 2023, 2024 Common App prompts, they have remained the same as last year.
So how do you choose a topic?
All right, folks, I'm going to go back to that.
Kids often think that to write a great Common App essay, they have to have had some kind of like massive cataclysmic experience in life. And we have literally had kids write essays about climbing Mount Kilimanjaro in Africa or opening up a library, in India. Some kids have done incredible, incredible things. Go back one, Kate. Yep. But you can also find tremendous meaning in just everyday experiences. So when you're choosing a topic, it's important to choose a topic that you connect with on a personal level. This is something that you're going to have to basically do a deep dive into in terms of your feelings. So you have to feel connected to it. To choose a topic, you should reflect on what you want the college to know about you beyond your academics. Don't use your essay to sum up all of the things that you have listed in the activities section or all of your academic achievements, because that's just wasted space. Or is this going crazy, Katie?
Yeah, it's going a little crazy.
There we go. Okay. It's great to find a topic that leads you to an aha moment, something that gave you a new sense of motivation or mental clarity. And again, remember, this is not your personal manifesto. It's not a diary entry. This is meant to sell you to schools. So choosing a topic that schools will find attractive, that demonstrates things about you that will make you attractive to them, that's really important.
Right. And we really stress showcase piece because a lot of times students will take a look at these prompts and they'll think about the worst thing that's ever happened to them in their lifetime. And that's what they choose to write about. Okay. And really, even if you're writing about something horrible that happened to you, really, that's got to be like a very small part of that essay where like 75% needs to be about the growth and how you resolve that issue. So really, it's not so much about the struggle, it's really how you resolved it.
The next one. Okay, so one thing the kids often focus on is a defining experience. I have a picture of an ice skater on here because several years ago, I helped a Great Valley girl write an essay on ice skating that helped her get into an Ivy League school. Lots of kids love to write about sports, which is great. There are a lot of common topics that kids tend to gravitate towards, like the big win or an orthopedic injury. If you're writing about something that is a commonly selected topic, it's important to make sure that you find something really unique to say about it.
Right. So sometimes when people do talk about sports, they'll talk about a sports injury or a big win. Those are such common themes. So you really want to think about something more specific within that sport to write about.
Another big popular thing to choose for kids, Katie said kids like to write about the worst thing that's ever happened to them. One of the prompts has to do with facing a challenge. And a lot of kids feel very comfortable talking about challenges that they faced in their life, which is great. However, the focus should not be on the challenge. The focus should be, as Katie said, on the recovery. And it should always end with a sense of resolution. We never want a kid to turn in an essay where when you get to the end of the essay, you think, oh my God, this poor kid, what's going to happen to them? It has to end with a sense that the kid has grown and learned from the experience and that they're doing just fine. So again, at the bottom, we have that basic recipe. This is who I was, then I had an experience, and this is how I grew from it and what I learned from it and what I'm going to do with that moving forward. This is one of my favorite pictures on this slideshow. One of the best essays that I ever read. The guy who wrote it is probably in his late 30s by now. He wrote it about pancakes, not climbing Mount Kilimanjaro, not building a library in India. It was about a breakfast food. Essays, really great essays, have layers to them. And that's one of the reasons why I always tell the story about this essay. The kid wrote an essay about how every day during high school, he came downstairs for breakfast and his father had made him pancakes. So he'd walk downstairs and there's the dad with the plate like, hey, buddy, let's have breakfast together. And the kid, you know how teenagers are, was like, oh my God, don't talk to me. So as a ninth grader, the kid was super irritated by this pancake breakfast. But as he grew and matured throughout high school, he got to realize by the time he was a senior, how busy his father was and how much responsibility he shouldered, how hectic his schedule was and how many demands he had on him. But no matter what was going on in his life, this man took 10 minutes out of every day just for his son. So that was kind of a wonderful like awakening component to this essay. And then so you've got the pancakes, you've got the kid's relationship with the dad, then you've got the kid realizing what his dad's life is really like and how meaningful this is. But the deepest layer of the essay was kind of this evolution of this, 15-year-old to 18-year-old, where the kid is as a ninth grader is really looking at the world through age-appropriate eyes, very myopic, very self-oriented as kids can be. And you see this gradual kind of like expansion. His lens broadens and he starts to understand the world in a different way. And that was the deepest level to the essay. So one of the reasons why it's so important to choose something that's really deeply meaningful is so that when you talk about personal growth, it's not one-dimensional, it's multi-layered, it's multifaceted. And that really allows admissions counselors to kind of look into you and see, wow, what are this kid's core values? What is this kid going to bring to our community? How are they going to be able to contribute? Mm-hmm. So now we're going to talk about the writing process. I think you have to hit forward to get to the pieces for this, Kate. So the writing process, there you go, is supposed to always, as teachers will tell you, it's supposed to begin with a brainstorming component and then move to an outline component and then a first draft and in this case, a second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh. These essays go through many drafts until you finally get to the final draft. A lot of teenagers like to skip the brainstorming and they like to jump right into the outline, or maybe they skip both the brainstorming and the outline and they go right into the actual composition phase. The essay will take many, many drafts because for many of these kids, I mentioned it's a really awkward piece to write. They figure out what they have to say, like they find their voice and they find their message as they're writing, which is why many, many drafts are typically necessary.
One of the things that will reduce the number of drafts for students is first starting with an outline. When kids just start writing their essay and they're just kind of trying to figure out what they're saying as they're writing, they tend to get lost in transition. An outline keeps them focused on their message.
It takes a lot longer without the pre-writing, for sure. They never believe us though, but it does.
Kids like to skip that part.
Okay, so we're going to talk for a minute about different ways to begin your essay. Kids really struggle with the beginning. Ironically, the toughest part of an essay to write are the 2 to 3 main body paragraphs. The introduction and the conclusion tend to be very malleable components, easily shaped, but kids always get stuck on the beginning. So we're going to talk about that for a minute. Here are 4 different great ways to start an admissions essay. You can start with a moment in time, start with a formal introductory paragraph, start with a question, or start with a bold statement. And we're actually going to show you excerpts from essays. The kids have given us permission to share them in just a second so that you can see examples. And we'll tell you where each of these kids went to college.
The reasons that we are presenting ways to begin an essay is because you immediately want to pull the reader in. Often kids will hear of this as a hook.
So the first one that we're going to show you was actually written in the Great Valley Cafeteria by my oldest son. He got an academic scholarship to Penn State. This is an example of a moment in time. So we're just going to give you guys a few seconds to read this over. It's faster if you read it yourselves than if we read it to you. So just take a minute to read it. So this is a moment in time. If we were in a regular class, I would ask you guys questions. He's catching a swarm of bees, which is definitely an unusual thing to do. His essay ended up being about how he wanted to study plant science and nature, so it fit with this. But when you pick a moment in time, you describe one specific moment. You do it in present tense, and it should be an interesting moment. You don't write about making a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. You write a moment where you write about a moment where you're doing something that intrigues your reader. So they are, as Katie said, they're hooked and they want to read more. This essay was written by a young woman who went to Franklin and Marshall. She is now going to PA school, I think at Stanford. So this is an example of a formal traditional expository opening paragraph. So take a minute to read. So as you can see, this takes more of the format of a traditional 5-paragraph essay. In introduction, it's got a thesis statement at the end of it. And it's specific enough that you are intrigued and want to read more, but it's not so specific that it gives everything away that's going to be covered in the essay.
Okay.
The next one. Okay, this one was written by a student who went to Maryland College of Institute of Art and transferred to Syracuse University. This is an example of how to open with a question. So just take a minute and read this. So it's short, it's direct, it opens with a question, again, to draw the reader in, and there's no ambiguity in terms of what's going to be addressed in this essay. You know that the next paragraph is going to be about how the kid didn't really enjoy the art-only culture and wanted something more, wanted a broader experience. And last but not least, this one,
a bold statement.
This girl went to the University of Pennsylvania. So just take a minute and read this. So this is an example of an opening to an essay where a kid talked about a really traumatic experience. This girl had a very serious brain injury and basically had to take like junior year off, which was not good for her academically or emotionally. But the essay was like, the part about the trauma was this big. The rest of the essay was how she fought her way back, which is kind of what you want to do with any sort of, negative experience that you're bringing up. So sometimes essays have to be used to explain something. Not everybody has the easiest time in high school. And if you struggled a little bit, that's okay. This is a great place to address that. If you have had any kind of suspension in school or out of school, prolonged school absence, if you've been arrested, if you've been charged for a crime, or even if you've had some really tough grades show up on your transcript, this is the place to talk about it.
Now,
address it head on.
In terms of being arrested or being charged with a crime, that is a question that students will be asked on their applications. But in regard to school absences or suspensions, that is something that you want to check with your school to see if it's going to be on the transcript. You don't necessarily have to write about something that they are not going to see. So if they're not going to see that you were suspended, no need to write an essay about it.
You don't want to tell.
You don't want to share information that doesn't need to be shared. Okay.
And just so that you're aware, there is an additional section on the Common Application right after the main admissions essay where you can share anything that you want about your experience during high school. So like if you want to write maybe you failed a class or you have a D or something, you can write your main admissions essay and then you can address that in that sort of like additional section.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, go ahead. Mrs. Saraceno says Great Valley does not include information about attendance on the transcript. Thank you, Mrs. Saraceno.
That's good to know.
If you have something to explain, Kate, you want to talk?
If you have something to explain, it's very important that you do not blame other people for it. You want to take responsibility and be very honest about your situation. The biggest part of this is really explaining the lesson that you learned, hopefully, and the personal growth that followed. So again, even the event that occurred, remember, it has to be small. Whereas like the majority of the essay would really need to be about your honest assessment of like why you did, what you do differently today with what you know, and how you've grown as a result. Oh, AI. So this is a hot topic right now.
Very hot. Yeah. So when ChatGPT first became available a couple months ago, Kate and I really played around with it with admissions essays, and it was pretty interesting. I'll explain that to you in just a minute, but we're going to go through the slide first. The pros to AI are it's less work. You put in ChatGPT or any of the other tools that you want an admissions essay on whatever your topic is, and boom, you've got it in 90 seconds. So it's fast. If you know how to give the AI tool that you're using really good direction, you'll get an essay that's okay. It won't be terrible. It won't be great, but it won't be terrible. So those are the pros. You can get an okay essay. The cons are they're often very stiff and formal. There is no way to replicate a human being's unique voice and inner spirit articulated through the written word. You can't replicate that. So regardless of how we played around with the tools and what we did with them, we even fed essays from other kids through AI detectors to see what would happen. The tone definitely lacks a human element and a personal style. Probably the most important thing to think about here is that the essays are not authentic. They are technically plagiarized. And if a college finds out that you've done that or suspects that you've done it, they will not accept you. They will not accept you. So that's pretty important.
Yeah, and most schools are mentioning AI. A lot of them we're finding in the applications, like they acknowledge that it's there, right? And they are saying to students, you can use it as a resource to help you with your editing, but it has to be your work, your words, like Jenny's saying, your tone. So you can get great ideas from AI, but at the end of the day, it really has to be your voice. And when kids just focus completely on AI, it doesn't sound like it's written by a teenager very frequently. Which is also a dead giveaway. So it's either written by AI or it's written by, a graduate, a student that's an adult that's graduated college.
So when we played around with the tools, what we found was that if you can work backwards, like if you're an admissions counselor, right? I'm sure admissions counselors at colleges could do this. Guidance counselors could do it. Kate and I were able to do it. If you know exactly what ingredients you want the essay to produce and precisely how to issue the commands and how to play around with it subtly to get all, like I talked about the layering, all of the layering in place, you can get an essay that's okay. It's pretty good. It's not great though. It'll never be an A+. But very few kids know how to do those things that I just talked about when it comes to an AI tool. You can only understand how to do that if you have a really deep understanding of what the finished product is supposed to look like. Okay. We're going to go ahead. Kate mentioned that colleges are doing things. Colleges have been experimenting with AI tools so that they can learn, the admissions counselors, so that they can learn how to identify AI generated essays. They're also experimenting with AI detecting software. As I mentioned, we fooled around with this, and then we would put the essays through the detecting software, and they all got picked up. So we would feed one that was written actually by a kid through the software and one that was AI generated, and the AI generated would come out like 75% AI, and the authentic one would come out like 20%. So there really was a difference in terms of how they were detected. But some schools, as Kate said, are actually offering guidance about how to use AI responsibly. Georgia Tech is the only one we have found so far that is doing this on the undergraduate level. So we're just going to show you the instruction that they're offering. Go ahead. Take a minute and read this statement. So what they are suggesting that you use it to brainstorm and to edit and refine, but not to do the actual main part of the writing. And they also talk about using it to write a resume, which many schools will accept a resume of activities. The last thing we're going to talk to you about, actually, we have two more things to talk about. One is the Supreme Court decision. So let's go to that slide. I'm sure you all heard that this summer, the Supreme Court issued a decision. Kate, can you hit the slide? That reversed affirmative action in terms of college admissions. Go back one, please.
Yep.
Okay. So for the Common App essay, let me back up. Colleges are no longer allowed to use race, religion, sexual identity, or preference to give one group of students an advantage over another. So if you belong to some kind of minority group, how are you supposed to communicate this effectively? The essay is a great place to do it. It's really the only place to do it. So you can communicate it, but you can't make it the topic of your essay. So we've got some bullet points for you here. Kate, you want to talk?
Well, in terms of like communicating it, but not making it a topic of your essay, it's important if you're if you have a unique cultural experience that makes you stand out, that you do reference it. Okay. Because that's been your life experience. It's just, you have to kind of weave it into different topics that align with that. So a couple of the topics that we did were code switching, which is like living between two linguistic worlds, which is, if you have two parents that speak, or, there's another language spoken in the home, something like that. You can also talk about, and these are examples, what it's like to be the only whatever kid in an all-white orchestra, and kind of talking about that unique experience and what you bring to the table. Some students decide to write about cultural norms and kind of like the difficulty of straddling their parents' old cultural norms with the new American norms that they're presented with. Other kids talk about using art as a means of self-exploration to understand transgender identity. You can see these all touch on race, religion, ethnicity, sexual orientation without making it the core of the essay.
And these are all the things that Kate just mentioned. These are all essays that we read. The code switching one was written by a girl whose family was from West Philly, and they moved to the main line, and she went to one of the mainline public high schools, and she was she was a minority racially, but also culturally, because she had spent, 14 years in West Philly. And she really learned very quickly that she had to talk differently when she was with her, her mainline friends than when she was with her West Philly friends. And she had to listen to different music, and she had to dress differently. So that was her way. And this was long before the Supreme Court case came out, but that was really her way of saying, like, this was my unique experience. And this is what I learned about not only myself, but about how to navigate, transitions in life, and, how to exist in a diverse, in diverse situations.
Mhm.
So you basically have to take like an indirect approach. These essay topics can be used for the Common App essay, but they can be also used for supplemental essays. Since the Supreme Court decision came out, many colleges revised their supplemental essays. A lot of the supplemental essays now have to do with these topics of diversity and identity. So I'm just going to read the one from William and Mary. Are there any particular communities that are important to you? And how do you see yourself being a part of our community? Whatever community, if you're a minority, you could talk about that, whether it's racial, whether it's religious, whether it has to do with, sexual identity or orientation. Same thing, look at Richmond's one. Richmond welcomes students from various backgrounds. What is at least one way you will contribute to our community that is not already mentioned in your application? So they're offering you the opportunity to talk about, how you are a part of some kind of unique segment or different segment of the population. If kids have to answer these questions and they don't have any kind of unique identity, they don't belong to any sort of group, that's a minority, or that is diverse, it's great for them to talk about how they know people who are part of those groups, or maybe they work with them, or they've got them in their family, or some kind of proximity situation where they have been exposed to this and they can talk about what they've learned from that. That's a really good way to approach that. Is there anything else you want to say about this, Kate?
No, I think, the important thing, it's very confusing because they're omitting sex, race, identity, all sexual identity from the app. But at the same time, you're hearing, from Biden, from Harvard, don't be afraid to talk about those pieces of yourself because they are real. They show it's sharing another piece of yourself that's very personal and unique to your own life experiences.
And most schools are looking to keep their populations very diverse. One of the big concerns about the Supreme Court decision is that, we're going to revert back to many, many years ago where colleges were, almost completely white, or and that's a big concern. So colleges are still actively seeking kids who are from different backgrounds, and it's a selling point. So again, the essay is meant to sell you. If you can claim, membership to one of these different segments of the population, sell it, make it work for you.
That's right. These questions are there for that purpose.
Yeah. So we have time for questions. We have our final slide. If anybody wants to get in touch with us, if you have more questions, you can reach us at our email, call us, find us on Instagram or Facebook. We also have a Facebook group. But what questions can we answer for you? And we can answer questions about the essay, but also if you just have questions about, in general, about the admissions process.
And if you could, please place any questions you have in the chat.
How should the personal statement be different from it's cut off from the something essay? Okay. So on the Common Application, the main essay is the personal statement. That's the 650-word essay, the one where we showed you all of the prompts. So almost every school that accepts the Common Application will accept that essay. Some say that it's not required. That doesn't mean that they won't read it if it's there. Mm-hmm. In addition to that, every college that takes the Common App has a supplemental section, and that supplemental section may contain additional essays. For some schools, it's just a bunch of boxes that questions with drop-down menus. And for others, there could be, 5 or more essays to write. So you're going to write that main personal statement / essay, and then you have to see what additional essays you have to write for the schools that are on your list.
What is important to remember is the supplemental essays is an opportunity to say something else about yourself that you haven't already shared in the personal statement / main essay.
Mhm. And
So
you never want to repeat. Don't give up the opportunity to, again, to make it work for you.
Mhm. Any other questions?
Sorry, I was muted. There is a question about the recording. We typically do put the recordings on our high school counseling page. And they too. We have a new website, so we'd have to figure out how to navigate that, but we hope to hope to post it there.
If we don't have any other questions, I'm going to add one more thing, if that's okay.
Mhm.
In terms of how to manage the volume of writing, a really good way to approach that is to get the main common application essay done first. And then, as I mentioned, go through the schools that are on your list and go through all of their supplemental questions, pull the essay questions, put them in one document, and then read them over to see where there's overlap. If you have a question about overcoming an obstacle and another school has a question about facing adversity, that's really the same topic. So you can probably write one essay and use it for both schools.
Mhm.
Similarly, a lot of schools have the question, why do you want to go here? Write it once and then use it as a template and swap out the specifics. And
Mhm.
that way you minimize the amount of writing that you have to. Some schools have really unusual topics, like Wake Forest has a top 10 list. That's pretty unusual. So you can't really, actually, you can take part of it and use it for Elon, but no other school asks you that. So some of the questions are unique and you really can't double up on them, but try to minimize the writing as much as possible. Okay, this is a good question. If doing the Common App, how do you submit the supplemental essay or when? Go to separately on the college website. Do you want to explain that, Katie? You want me to do it?
Yeah, so when you're on the common application and you add your schools on, as Jenny was saying, you're going to put your main admissions essay on, but every college will have their own list section of questions. Within those questions will be their supplemental essays, and you will plug your essay right into there in the college specific questions on the Common App.
So when you go to submit that school, so let's say that it's an application to Temple University. When you go to submit your application to Temple University, you're going to click review and submit on the Common App. And that's going to take you to a page. First, they'll show you if anything's left blank. And assuming that it's not, it will say, do you want to download a PDF of this application? You will say yes. What we recommend is that you print out the PDF and you read through the whole Common Application plus the Temple University questions. Make sure that everything is correct, make any changes, and then you go back and then you say that you're ready to move on from that PDF to the payment page. So when you send Temple out, it will automatically send the Common App plus the Temple section. And if there are essays, it will go with Temple. It'll travel with Temple.
Some of them will also have an opportunity to upload a resume. You can also do that, which would also go with Temple.
And we've got a question here. Does it matter when you apply? Do you want to talk about due dates?
Yes, so it does matter when you apply. There are several different due dates. Rolling admission schools have generally started accepting applications in July, the end of July, and will generally accept them until when? May, Jenny?
Yeah.
Rolling doesn't mean like wait until April. It really means a lot of the rolling schools happen to be very popular. So we really recommend that you get your application in earlier rather than later. A lot of those rolling schools also have priority deadlines. Generally, they're around like November 1st. And the priority deadline means that you can still be considered for merit aid, scholarship money, which is money that you don't have to pay back. There is something called early action, and you can apply to as many early action schools as you want, as long as they offer that. Early action dates are usually, unless you're looking at like Florida or some other southern schools, they're usually in November, the beginning of November or mid. Early action means you find out sooner whether you have been admitted to a school or not. Sometimes you get very lucky and you find out before January, but sometimes early action still means you don't find out until March. Depends on the college. There's also early decision schools. This is something that you only can do with one college at a time. Early decision is a binding agreement between you and the college, and it's a contract that you sign, your guidance counselor signs, the students sign, saying, if you admit me, I will withdraw my applications from all other schools. There is a reason that students do take this strategy, and it's because it's the one way that, again, it always depends on the school, that gives kids a leg up on admissions. So it increases their chance of acceptance, because basically they're saying to the college, I'm a sure thing. If you offer me a seat, I will take it and withdraw my applications from all other schools. This is something you really only want your student to do if they are in love with the school, they have done the research, they have visited, and they are absolute certain. If a student doesn't get into their early decision school, and that deadline usually, again, is also in like November,
Early decision 1.
early decision 1. If you don't get into your early decision 1 school, you usually find out by mid-December if you've been accepted to your ED school. If you haven't, or they said, we're going to put you in the regular decision pool, you're released from your contract. You can turn around in January and apply to another college, early decision 2. Okay, if they offer that as an option. So early decision 2 is usually in January, beginning of January, like January 2nd.
I just want to go back for a second. Rolling admissions, those applications are reviewed on a first come, first served basis. So it's
Correct.
much easier to get into a rolling admissions school in, early September when they have 5,000 seats in their freshman class open than if you do it in April when they have like 150 seats left. So it really is important to get rolling schools out early. There's one more deadline. Very few schools have it. It's called restricted early action. It's a handful of schools in the country that have it. It's kind of an evil deadline because every school has their own rules for it. But if you're considering early decision, we really encourage you to look at acceptance rates for schools for early decision versus regular decision. At some schools like Carnegie Mellon, there's like a 3% difference between early decision and regular decision. But at other schools, there could be like up to a 30 to 40% difference. It's also important if a school has early decision 1 and early decision 2 to find out how much of the freshman class was pulled from the ED1 pool versus the ED2 pool. Sometimes ED1 is actually significantly easier to get into than ED2. So there's a lot of research and strategy that can go into selecting which deadline is really right for you.
One of the, I was going to say, do you want to talk about the common data set to find that information?
Yeah, good.
Okay. One of the ways that you can find out this information is through the common data set. And so you would be looking at 2022, 2023 common data set for the college. And you can see not only how many students applied with the SAT, ACT, but you can see GPA and the acceptance rates for the ED round if they chose to provide it. And I say if they chose to because some don't.
They just leave it out. Okay, so we have a question about ED. If you apply ED1 to a school, you have 3 possible outcomes. You get in, correct? That's great, wonderful, hooray. You get deferred to regular decision, which means that you'll have to wait until April with everybody else to find out, or they say no. And if they say no, that's it. It's over. You can't reapply. You can reapply to some state schools if you don't get the desired result or the preferred campus, but with private schools, you can't do that. We had another question about resumes and LinkedIn. Do you want to talk to that, or you want me to talk about it?
So I can talk about resumes for a moment. I'll let you take the LinkedIn piece. We do, if students have 10 or more activities that they want to showcase and or very unique activities that are very hard to break down into 150 characters on the common application, which is all that you have. We do recommend a resume. It's a really great opportunity to showcase what students have done in grades 9 through 12 and ongoing commitment to passion. It also kind of like really shows how much time and energy students put into things that are important to them beyond their academics. So it's really showing how they can balance academic success with extracurriculars as well, which is something that they want to see. So we love
not every school will take a resume, but many of them will.
So I wanted to say, not every school will take a resume. You will find on the Common App, some of them say, if you have a resume, you can upload it here. If that is not an option, you can always call the school and say, can I email it to you? Okay. And you would email it to the admissions email address. Now, often, and you should know this, after your student applies to a college, they're going to get an email back from that school with an applicant portal. Often students can upload their resume to the applicant portal as well. if that's not an option, they can email it separately.
There are very few schools that say don't, like UVA says don't send us anything. Very few schools say that. So you can send it most places. Question about LinkedIn. Some college applications in their supplement, they have a place where you can list a link to an online presence. If a lot of kids have done amazing things outside of school and they've got, I don't know, 5,000 followers on Instagram because they're doing something really cool, or they've got a website, or they've got an online store, or they've got, maybe a business or something that they have up on LinkedIn. If it's appropriate and the link that you're going to send, whether it's to LinkedIn or to something else, actually contains new information that is not well represented in the application already, then definitely include it. And as Kate said, if you can't put it on the application, you can email it, or sometimes you can put it in the portal. Any more questions?
Okay, I don't see any more questions coming in. Thank you so much to Jenny and Kate for presenting this evening from My Admissions Sherpa. This was very helpful.